Christians around the world often say that Jesus was the greatest teacher who ever lived. Not just a great moral figure, not just a prophet, but the wisest human being in history. Sermons, songs, and books praise his teachings as divine wisdom, unparalleled in clarity and depth. And yet, if we take a step back and analyze this claim with logic and reason, setting aside blind devotion and emotional attachment, the conclusion becomes uncomfortable, even for the most devout. If Jesus really was the greatest teacher who ever lived, he failed miserably at one very basic thing: making himself understood. A simple test. How many interpretations? Imagine you're in a classroom. The teacher explains a concept, let's say basic algebra. After class, you ask the students what they learned. One says it's about geometry. Another thinks it's biology. A third says it was about cooking. Would you call that teacher a genius? This is exactly what we see in the case of Jesus. If he truly was the best teacher to ever walk the earth, why are there over 40,000 different Christian denominations today? Each one interprets Jesus' words differently. Some say salvation is by faith alone, others add works. Some believe in predestination, others in free will. Some baptize babies, others baptize adults. Some eat his body and blood in symbolic form, others claim it's literally transformed. Clearly, this master teacher couldn't deliver a coherent, unifying message if his life depended on it. The parable problem. One of the trademarks of Jesus' teaching method was the parable, short stories with a moral or spiritual point. Christians say he used them because they were simple and easy to remember. But if we read the Gospels carefully, we discover something odd. Even his closest disciples rarely understood what the parables meant. Over and over again, they ask him privately to explain them. And sometimes, he refuses to clarify. In Matthew 13 verses 10 to 15, Jesus even says that he speaks in parables so that people won't understand. Because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. Wait a second. Did the greatest teacher in history deliberately choose a method that confuses people? That hides the meaning rather than reveals it? That's like a math teacher saying, I write equations so my students don't understand them. That way only the worthy ones will figure it out. That's not wisdom. That's elitism. And terrible pedagogy. No written words of his own. Here's another odd fact. Unlike other great teachers and philosophers, like Socrates, Plato, Confucius, Buddha, Jesus never wrote down a single word himself. Everything we know about his teachings comes from second-hand accounts, written decades after his death by followers, each with their own agenda. If Jesus really wanted to make sure his message was crystal clear, why didn't he write anything himself? Why not dictate a scroll? A letter? A simple document outlining his beliefs? Surely the Son of God could write. Surely he knew how language worked. Why leave the most important message in human history up to hearsay and recollection? Would a wise teacher trust his legacy to the imperfect memories of others? Contradictory teachings. A good teacher avoids contradictions. He or she explains ideas clearly, builds understanding step by step, and addresses confusion before it spreads. But Jesus' teachings are full of contradictions. In Matthew 5 verse 16 he says, Let your light shine before others. But then in Matthew 6 verse 1 he says, Do not perform your righteous acts before men. In Matthew 10 verse 34 he says, I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. But in John 14 verse 27 he says, Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. In some verses he says, Judge not, Matthew 7 verse 1, and in others he tells people to judge righteously, John 7 verse 24. Would the best teacher in history leave us with such ambiguity? Would he say one thing in the morning and the opposite in the evening? If any modern educator did that, they'd be fired for confusion and inconsistency. Teaching through fear and threats. Another troubling feature of Jesus' teaching style is how often he used fear to motivate people. Eternal fire, outer darkness, weeping and gnashing of teeth, these images appear again and again. He teaches that those who don't believe in him will be condemned, that those who are not with him are against him, that the path to life is narrow, and few find it. That's not teaching. That's psychological manipulation. The best teachers inspire curiosity, openness, and critical thinking. Jesus' message often appeals to fear of punishment and promises of reward, the oldest and most primitive tools of control. What kind of wise man builds a spiritual philosophy on a foundation of emotional blackmail? Jesus never taught science, logic, or rational thinking. Some say Jesus was wise because he taught moral truths. But even in that area, he didn't do anything revolutionary. Love your neighbor was already taught in Leviticus. Do unto others existed in multiple cultures before him. Even Confucius said it centuries earlier. But aside from basic ethics, Jesus never taught critical thinking, science, or logic, disciplines that have truly advanced humanity. He never challenged people to think analytically. He didn't explain the natural world. He didn't encourage questioning. In fact, he praised childlike faith and condemned doubt. Could we really call someone wise who discourages the use of reason? The greatest minds of history expanded human understanding. Jesus told people to believe without seeing, to trust blindly, and to accept mystery over reason. The ambiguity of salvation. Of all the things Jesus could have made clear, salvation, the way to eternal life, should have been the clearest. But ironically, it's the most debated among Christians. What must one do to be saved? Some say, faith alone. Others say, faith and works. Some say you need baptism. Others say it's optional. Some say it's predestined. Others say it's a choice. Some say only 144,000 will be saved. Others say, all who believe. Why wasn't this crystal clear? If someone fails a test because the instructions were vague, we blame the teacher, not the student. And yet here we are, 2,000 years later, still arguing about what Jesus meant. If your eternal destiny depends on understanding one man's message, shouldn't that message be unambiguous? Would we hire him today? Let's imagine Jesus applies for a job today, as a university professor, a life coach, or even a school teacher. Would he be hired? He doesn't use evidence-based methods. He avoids writing things down. He refuses to clarify his points. He contradicts himself. He intimidates students with threats. And most of his students completely misunderstand his message. Would any academic institution accept this as great teaching? Or would they say, thanks, but no thanks? Even in modern religious education, theologians spend decades trying to interpret what Jesus meant. They write entire books on a single sentence. Why would we need so much interpretation if the original teacher was that good? Conclusion: the myth of the master teacher. Jesus may have inspired millions. He may have changed history. But being influential is not the same as being clear, rational, or wise. By every standard of effective teaching, clarity, consistency, universality, and practical application, Jesus falls short. Not because he was evil, or malicious, or even unkind, but because his message simply wasn't understandable. A true master teacher doesn't leave a trail of confusion, division, and contradiction behind. He leaves unity, clarity, and progress. Maybe it's time we stop repeating cliches and start thinking critically. Was Jesus a moral teacher? Perhaps. Was he the greatest teacher of all time? Not even close. Thank you for watching. If you found this video interesting or thought-provoking, please consider giving it a like, sharing it with others, and leaving a comment with your opinion. I'd love to hear what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future content. See you in the next video.